wherever you're watching this from, let your shoulders drop for a second. There's a phone call he never made. Not because he couldn't. The number was still saved, still worked, still would have rung on the other end. He just never dialed it. And then, one Tuesday morning, it stopped being a call he was choosing not to make and started being one he could never make again. I'll get to that. But first, you should know how long he'd been rehearsing it. I don't know if this happened exactly this way to anyone, but I think it's happened, in some form, to a lot of people. Let's call him he. It doesn't matter what his name was. What matters is the conversation he carried around for years, folded up small, taken out, and rehearsed almost every night before he fell asleep, and never once actually had. It started with his father. Not a dramatic falling out. No slammed doors. No single sentence either of them could point back to as the moment it broke. Just a slow drifting apart that neither of them fought hard enough to stop. A disagreement about money that turned into weeks of not calling. Weeks that turned into months out of stubbornness more than anger. Months that turned into years out of habit more than anything else at all. He used to think there'd be time. That's the quiet lie almost everyone tells themselves about estrangement. That it's temporary. A pause rather than an ending. Something that will resolve itself naturally once enough time has softened whatever caused it. He told himself that at every holiday he spent without his father in the room, at every birthday that passed with a card he thought about sending and didn't, at every year that folded into the next one, the distance calcifying a little more each time, without either of them ever deciding out loud that this was how it would stay. There were moments scattered across those years when it almost broke. A mutual cousin's wedding where they ended up seated 2 tables apart, close enough to see each other, far enough that neither of them had to cross the room. A voicemail his father left once, on the wrong night by the sound of it, slightly unsteady, saying only, "It's your dad. Just wanted to hear your voice. That's all," before hanging up without leaving a callback number. As if he already expected it wouldn't be returned. He listened to that voicemail more times than he'd admit to anyone. He never called back. The conversation he rehearsed was always roughly the same. He'd call, and his father would pick up, surprised. There would be an awkward beat of silence, the kind 2 proud men are equally capable of sitting inside without breaking first. And then he'd say it. Not an apology exactly, because he wasn't sure anymore which of them owed one. Just an opening. "I don't want to keep doing this. I miss you. Can we just talk?" In his head, sometimes his father softened immediately, relieved that someone had finally said it first. Sometimes his father was quiet for a long moment before saying he'd been hoping for the call too. Sometimes it went badly. Old grievances resurfacing. The same stubbornness on both sides. But even in the versions where it went badly, at least it was a real conversation. At least it was something other than silence. He never made the call. Every time he came close, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the contact, something stopped him. Pride, mostly, if he's honest. A fear that reaching out first meant admitting the estrangement had been his fault, when some nights he believed that, and other nights he didn't believe it at all. Life kept moving in the meantime, the way it does, indifferent to unfinished things. He got married. His father wasn't there, though he'd been invited. A stiff, formal invitation. The kind you send more out of obligation to the idea of family than genuine hope. His father sent a card. No call. He remembers holding that card for a long time, turning it over, looking for something between the printed lines that might mean more than it said. There wasn't anything, just a signature, and beneath it, in slightly shakier handwriting than he remembered, 4 words. Proud of you, son. He almost called that night. He didn't. He told his new wife it didn't matter, that he hadn't expected his father to come anyway, that it was easier this way. She didn't push back, but he remembers the way she looked at him, the way people look at you when they can tell you're saying something you don't fully believe. A daughter was born 2 years later. Photos went out to family, the way they do, and he included his father on the list, without quite admitting to himself why it mattered so much that he did. No response came back. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself that a lot over the years. A small, private lie he got better and better at believing, at least during the day. At night, lying in bed, running through the rehearsed conversation one more time, he was never quite as convincing to himself. His daughter asked about her grandfather once, around age 6, the way children ask things, plainly, without any of the weight adults attach to the same question. Why don't we ever see him? He gave her some version of, it's complicated, the way his own father might have answered the same question decades earlier. And she seemed to accept it the way children do, filing it away without needing more. He remembers feeling a specific kind of grief in that moment, not for himself, but for the version of his daughter's childhood that might have included a grandfather who showed up and didn't. The call came on a Tuesday morning, early. The kind of hour that phone calls aren't supposed to happen at, unless something's wrong. It was his aunt. Her voice had that particular careful flatness people use when they're trying to deliver something enormous without letting it crack their own composure first. His father had had a heart attack 2 days earlier. He hadn't wanted anyone to call right away. Hadn't wanted, even then, to be the reason for a phone ringing that his son might not want to answer. By the time his aunt decided the silence had gone on long enough, it was already over. He sat on the edge of his bed for a long time after that call ended, phone still in his hand, the exact same hand, the exact same contact still saved under Dad, still technically capable of connecting a call that would now ring into nothing at all. The funeral was small. A handful of relatives. A few of his father's old co-workers he barely recognized. One neighbor who cried harder than anyone else in the room and later admitted, quietly, that his father used to help her carry groceries up the stairs every week without ever being asked. He stood at the front, next to a casket, delivering a eulogy he'd written in the 2 days since the call, full of careful, generic sentences about a good man, a hard worker, someone who loved his family, sentences that felt true, and also somehow beside the point, because the thing he actually wanted to say out loud, in that room, in front of everyone, was simply, "I'm sorry it took this to make me call, except I never even got to call." He didn't say that part. He kept it folded up small, the same way he'd kept the rehearsed conversation for years. But the real moment, the one I mentioned at the beginning, hadn't happened yet. That came 3 days later, at the house, going through his father's things with his aunt, sorting what could be kept from what couldn't. In a drawer in his father's bedside table, underneath an old watch that no longer ran, and a stack of receipts nobody would ever need again, there was a small stack of birthday cards, his birthday cards, bought, apparently, every year. Cards his father had never sent. Some still had the price sticker on the back. One, from what would have been 3 years ago, had actual writing inside. Half finished, crossed out, started again. He could make out a few lines before his father had apparently given up and started over on a fresh card instead. "I know I should have called by now. I keep thinking I'll do it tomorrow." And then the sentence just stopped there. No period. No further attempt to finish it. Just an ellipsis of his father's own hesitation, preserved by accident in a drawer neither of them ever expected anyone else to open. Underneath the cards, folded small the way people fold things they're not sure they want anyone else to find, was a single sheet of notepaper, the kind his father kept by the phone for grocery lists and reminders. On it, in the same slightly shaky handwriting, was something that looked like the beginning of the exact conversation his father had apparently been rehearsing too. A few possible opening lines, crossed out one after another, as if his father had been trying to find the right words, the same way his son had, night after night, for years. The last line on the page, the one that hadn't been crossed out, simply read, "I don't know how to start. I just want to start." He sat on the floor of that bedroom for a long time, holding a card meant for a birthday that had already passed, addressed to a version of himself his father had apparently thought about far more often than he'd ever let on. And he understood, all at once, with a clarity that felt almost cruel in its timing, that his father had been rehearsing a version of the exact same phone call. For years, on the other end of a silence he'd always assumed was one-sided. That night, back at his own home, he did something he hadn't planned. He took a piece of paper, not to send anywhere. There was no one left to send it to. And he wrote the conversation out, finally, start to finish, the way he'd rehearsed it in his head 100 times before. Not the version where his father apologized. Not the version where everything resolved neatly. Just an honest one, in his own words, admitting his part in the years of silence, and forgiving, as best he could. The part that had belonged to his father. He read it back once. Then he folded it and put it in a drawer of his own. Not to keep it hidden the way his father had, but because some things, once said, don't need an audience to be real. He'd finally had the conversation. It just happened 40 years too late, and to an empty room instead of a phone line. This was the moment. The one from the beginning. Not the funeral, not the phone call from his aunt. This, a drawer full of unfinished cards. Proof that the man on the other end of his rehearsed conversation had been rehearsing one too. Just as afraid, just as stubborn, just as certain there'd be more time than there actually was.
Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you're feeling completely relaxed. Sleep well, sweet dreams, and I'll see you again very soon. Good night.